So for the sake of the recording, once again, welcome to today's special session, a review satsang to especially look at some of the questions that have come up in our handling of the assignments. And oh my God, all of you have done an amazing job on that. Sangeeta and I have been pleasantly overwhelmed, overworked also in going through all of those amazing assignments. And at the end of it, we said, please put a question if you want. And so we ended up with all these questions that need to be answered now. So I said, before we go into module 2, let us try to clear the backlog of all these questions. So this is what today's session is all about. And all that I will request is that we are going to be having the questions typed out in the chat box. Sangeeta will be putting it there and she will be reading it out. We may not see her on the video today because she is dealing with a bit of a challenge today. So we will hear her voice and we'll see the question in the chat box and I will handle the answers. And the request I make is that please do not start adding new questions to the chat box now, because I think we have more than 30 questions to be handled today. So unless there's a question about something I say today that needs clarification, that is fine. But otherwise, let's not create new tangents. That is just a request before we start off today. Let's begin by invoking the Guru Parampara. Om Tadparamparaye Vidmahi Jnanalingeshwaraya Dhimahi Tanno Guruh Prachodayate. Om Yoga Maharshi Dr. Swami Gitananda Giri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Puduvai Shakti Puduvai Kalaimamani Yogacharini Amma Ji Meenakshi Devi Bhavanani Guru Mata Ki Jai. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. Wonderful. So as we go into today's session, I request Sangeeta to bring up the first of the questions and anything else that comes, and then I will do my best to try and answer them without creating too much of confusion. So over to you, Sangeeta.
Namaste, everyone. I hope this meeting finds you all well. Thank you so much, Dr. Sir. It's very strange for me not to be on video. It's quite unusual on Zoom. I woke up with quite a fever and coughing and all. Hopefully it's just a cold seasonal, but we'll be able to get some tests tomorrow. But I'm so happy to be here regardless. So just forgive me for not being able. You don't want to see me. You don't really want to see me today. So, okay, so let's begin. We have received your amazing assignments. We're still going through some of them, so please be patient. We will get through them. Each one of them requires care and depth in the same amount that you have shared depth and care. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer than expected. So the questions, we're going to begin with the question of ringing in the ears and tinnitus, because a few of you have asked this question. Would you all please mute your microphones, please? Thank you so much. So this first question is, when listening deeply, the ringing in my ears, which is always there, becomes louder. I wonder if that will stay, or will I transcend the sound eventually as well? And by the way, both here and in the document, we have not shared your names because some of the questions are personal and regard health. And so in order to maintain your privacy, there are no names there. Okay, that's the reason. Okay, sir, so that's the first one. I'll type a couple more regarding tinnitus while you answer the first one.
Perfect. Now, this is a very important question. And the reason it is important is tinnitus is a very common condition, often underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And because it is only the person having tinnitus who knows what it is like, it becomes a candidate for medically unexplained symptom conditions and also disbelief on the part of other people. So they think, oh, you're just making it up and you don't really have it. So I just want to put that out there that tinnitus can be very frustrating because not too many people are going to believe what you are talking about. Now, having had an ear condition in my childhood from swimming in a lot of dirty water, I picked up chronic otitis media and had to have some surgery in my middle ear. So I have off and on had tinnitus, and so I'm very sympathetic to people who talk about tinnitus. Now, just while we are on it, a very simple quick fix that often works for me, has worked for me for decades. Whenever I have one of these bouts of tinnitus, is close your nose and exhale against a closed nose. So it's because the moment you do that, you have changed the pressure across the tube that goes from your throat to your middle ear, the Eustachian tube. And I think 99 times out of 100, this has immediately given me a relief from the tinnitus I was feeling at that time. So I just thought I will share this quick fix SOS methodology. The second point here is often many people who have tinnitus think they are very spiritual and are hearing spiritual sounds. So you have to also be careful of this delusion that comes that they are not hearing the internal 10 sounds called the Dasa Dvani, but they are actually just having tinnitus and they think they're hearing some flute and lute and heavens are singing for them and that type of thing. And sometimes it can be very depressing when they come to know it is tinnitus and it is not spiritual awakening. So this is another side of the coin. Now the third one is when you start to do some of these practices like Brahmari, what it does is it may at times aggravate. It may aggravate this for a temporary period. But all I will say is this is like what happens often with homeopathy medicines. There is an initial aggravation so that you can settle the issue once and for all. So this is not a side effect. This is not a worsening. This is sort of clearing up. So Swamiji used to often ask people when they were not well, he said, are you sick to become sicker or are you sick to become better? I think this is a very important, this is the difference between salitogenesis and pathogenesis. You are sick to become sicker is pathogenic. You are sick to become better is salutogenic. That illness may be an opportunity for you to clear up some residual stuff that needs to be cleared up. Now, in modern times, we suppress that. And by suppressing, we don't give the body a chance to clear it out. So I'm just putting a few of these concepts out. Now, when we do these practices, the Shabda Pratyahara and others, we are now refining our sense of hearing. So we may feel that the tinnitus is becoming worse, but actually over time, you will find that by developing the Pratyahara, you will actually transcend the tinnitus. So initially, the tinnitus will become, you will become more sensitive to the tinnitus, but then after that, you will transcend the tinnitus. So just keep with the practice, keep working on it. And whenever it is too much, close your nose and blow, get the air through the Eustachian tube. This is excellent. Now make sure when you are doing this, you don't have a running nose. So you can do some Jalaneti, you can do Anunasika, Kapalbhati, clear out your nasal areas and then do it. Otherwise, you have just successfully spread infection from your nose to your ear. So this is why often many of the doctors don't like to suggest this blowing against a closed nose, which actually is a minimum version of Valsalva's maneuver, one of the autonomic tests we do. So I think I will stop there because I'm trying to keep very specific today.
Thank you,
there
sir.
is, yeah, there is that question on Brahmari for sinusitis. So what I would say is that Brahmari is definitely an excellent practice for sinusitis. We have found immense positive benefits along with medical management. So as an adjuvant therapy with medical management, we have found amazing improvements after the second, third, fourth week. At the first week, medical management and Brahmari plus or minus is the same. But after the second, third, and fourth week, the group of patients doing Brahmari with medical management, their improvements were significantly greater. So how does it work? Well, it is very popular to talk about endogenous nitric oxide. This is the term you need to remember. Endogenous nitric oxide. This is not an external nitric oxide, but you are producing it in your cells, and a healthy sinus has a lot of nitric oxide. When the sinuses are unhealthy, there's a lower level of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It helps the blood vessels to become wider and looser and relax. Let's call it, it helps the blood vessels to relax. When the blood vessels relax, your tissues will get better blood supply. If they get better blood supply, the oxygenation will be better. So it's as simple as this. This is why when you do Brahmari, not only are you helping your sinusitis, you may also be helping your hypertension. Because when the blood vessels start to relax, the diastolic blood pressure will start to come down, because diastolic blood pressure depends on tightness of the blood vessels, especially the peripheral ones, your capillaries. So when your capillaries relax, automatically what happens? Your blood pressure, diastolic goes down. If diastolic goes down, the systolic will automatically go down, because it is all part and parcel. The higher the diastolic, the systolic has to go even higher. When you lower the diastolic, systolic will start to come down automatically. So endogenous nitric oxide produced by humming, especially of the Brahmari, the Pranava, the Brahma Mudra, these three are very, very important. And if not, just hum a tune. Hum any tune you want. Hum whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Or just go around and it's going to be useful, okay? But why make a sound that has no meaning when you can make sounds that have meaning, have value, have purpose? Okay, so Om chanting is also very useful, especially with the prolonged makara, which Sangeeta and I did a long trial yesterday. We had a 90-minute session, and we realized how Zoom cuts off our humming every now and then. And we are trying to find ways that this sound barrier can be breached on Zoom. It doesn't seem to be our mics. It's the Zoom platform itself doesn't like sustained sound. It sort of breaks the sound. So we will get it to you. So I think I have answered that to some extent, Sangeeta. We'll go on to the next question.
Yes, there's only perhaps one question about the practice itself. It seems that people who have tinnitus have a really hard time focusing on expanding the awareness of sound because tinnitus takes over. And so the question here about what else could I try focus on in the internal aspect of the Shabda Pratyahara? Is it perhaps that we want to include the sound rather than exclude it? Can you maybe just to finish this, talk about that for just a minute?
Absolutely. See, the way to solve a problem is to acknowledge the problem. If you don't acknowledge the problem, you can never solve it. So by including the sound in our pratyahara, shabda pratyahara focus, what you actually do is you say that, yes, you are there, I accept you, and now let's deal with this, rather than trying to escape it. I think the danger we have is we try to escape from the problem by trying to hide the problem. Any problem can only be solved when you acknowledge its existence. When you acknowledge its existence, you can start to change it. If you deny its existence, you can never change it. Now, that is where politicians are good. They deny it. Deny climate change, deny COVID, deny humanity, deny anything. So then, they don't have to ever find a solution. If you accept there's climate change, you have to do something about it. If you accept there's a COVID pandemic, you have to do something about it. If you accept that you are an egotistic bigot, you have to do something about it. As simple as that. But if you don't acknowledge it, you can always say everybody else is at fault. So I think your suggestion to include the tinnitus and give it its space, communicate with it. That yes, I am aware you are there. Now, can we find a way that, we can get through this together and transcend it? I think that's a good way to go about it.
Thank you. That's wonderful, sir. Okay, so we're moving on to a question that has to do with inner sounds, but it's the inner sound of one's voice. So can you please talk a little about the inner voice, its source and nature, and the discernment to determine its authenticity? Now, this is a whole course. Yeah. But anyways.
That is, that inner voice, the conscience, our inner voice, our conscience, we have to be very careful. Is it the inner voice or is it the inner noise? Inner voice or inner noise? The inner noise is produced by our ego. The inner voice is produced by the buddhi. So there is a very big difference here. So the ego will always want to survive. The ego will always want to survive at any cost because it is driven by abhinivesha klesha, survival instinct. Whereas the inner voice, which is related to the buddhi, the discerning part of our consciousness, that inner voice is willing to accept that maybe sometimes there is somebody better than us and that we may have to step out of the way for the greater benefit of the wholesomeness. So the buddhi is capable of saying, please refer that patient to another specialist. The inner noise, the ego says, I will do it because I am me. Okay, this is the difference here. So when we want to understand the inner voice, what we need to do is put it under a small microscope and test it out. What is the test? The test is very simple. If that voice is based on our survival, if that voice and its instructions are based on just me, most probably it is not the inner voice, it is the inner noise. If it is giving us a command, a suggestion that is inclusive, okay, an inclusive suggestion where others are included in it, when fellow beings are included in it, when the greater picture is being brought into it, then most probably it is the inner voice. Because the inner voice will always be inclusive, the inner noise will be exclusive. So for me, I think the biggest test I give it always is when I have these hunches. We call it a hunch, we call it the conscience, we call it this gut instinct. So many words come for it. The immediate question I ask myself, is it inclusive or is it exclusive? Is it a voice that is guiding me towards greater good, or is it only focusing on my perceived good? If it is only my perceived good, most probably it is from the ego, it is not from the buddhi. Because the buddhi, the discerning part of our intellect, has the capacity to see the bigger picture. That is why Patanjali wants us to develop Viveka Khyati. He doesn't want us to develop, Asmita and Ahankara. He wants us to develop Viveka Buddhi. Now, this inner voice, it is the Buddhi. Why is it the Buddhi? Because the Buddhi understands that we are not the end all and be all of everything. The Buddhi has the intelligence to know that there is something bigger, which is our Atma. The Buddhi knows there is an Atma. The Buddhi knows there's an Atma, and it says the Atma is much bigger than you and your little finger. It understands that. But the ego says, even my little finger should not be hurt in the process. I shouldn't have to give up my chair for somebody else. Why should I let somebody else have the limelight? This is the ego. This is the ego noise. The Buddhi says the Atma understands the commonality of the energy. So for me, whenever I have doubt, is it my inner voice or is it my ego speaking? I address it this way. And of course, the inner voice, the true inner voice, will never want you to go against the Yama Niyama principle. This is another very, very beautiful way to analyze it. If you evaluate the command that is coming from within, use the test of the 5 Yama, 5 Niyama. If it is in tune with the Yama Niyama, most probably inner voice. If it is a deviant from the Yama Niyama, most probably it is the ego noise. It is a vitarka. Patanjali has told us the deviants, the vitarkas are there, and he says whenever there is a vitarka, become aware of the deviant. How do you know it is a deviant? Because it is anti-Yama Niyama. So the deviants are all anti-Yama Niyama. The moment you come across the deviant, realize it is noise and apply Pratipaksha Bhavanam, the contrary attitude. So Patanjali has given us a very clear thing. The vitarkas are the noise. Where do those noise come from? Patanjali has been very clear. From the Shatripus. Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, Mada, Matsarya. That is where they are coming through. Where are they coming from? Ajnana, from ignorance. From ignorance. That is then giving you all the Shatripus that rip you apart. Amma used to say the Ripus rip you apart. And that is why Himsa, Vitarka, Himsa Daya. Patanjali tells us, like violence. So the inner voice will never tell you to be violent. Kill someone so that you will survive. The inner voice will not say that. Steal from that person. Oh, and then you justify it. Oh, they have so much, they will not know that I took $10 out of their purse because they have $100. That is a justification of the ego. The Buddhi knows you have not earned that money. It is stealing. That is why the Buddhi will say, don't steal. But the ego says, steal. And this is where the more you train yourself through a process called Atma Vichara. The term here is Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara means self-inquiry. Inquiry into the self. And this is a very important part of Swadhyaya. Constant self-reflection. You can call Atma Vichara self-reflection. Nowadays, we use the term reflective self-learning in higher education. Reflective self-learning, it's Atma Vichara. The more you apply this constantly, the more you start to recognize the inner voice. And the inner voice will never tell you that you are better than anybody. Never. The inner voice will never tell you you're better than somebody and so you deserve the job. Your inner voice will never say you're better than somebody, so you deserve their car. No, that's not the inner voice. It's going to tell you, take a look at yourself. See how you can grow and evolve by your self-effort. That is what the inner voice tells us. Next one, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir.
That's for the 2-hour lecture. Maybe I'll take it up on one of my Saturdays.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you. So the next two questions, there are two in the same box, are about hearing loss or deafness. So it's the opposite of having extra sounds, let's say. I would like to ask, if I may, how one might factor Nada Yoga into the lives of the partially or profoundly deaf. Separate question from another person. How would you teach Shabda Pratyahara, Soham Mantra, and Brahmari Pranayama with Shanmukhi Mudra to a student who has no sense of hearing?
I must admit, when I saw those questions, I was at a loss. I was at a loss of how to answer, because those are questions that really strike you hard. And it really made me contemplate deeply. And as I was talking to Sangeeta yesterday about some of these concepts, it suddenly struck me that when one sense is lost, often nature will help the person have a stronger function of other senses. This is a common occurrence in many people who lose a sense. If they lose sight, the hearing may become better. If they lose hearing, the sight and touch may become better. This is a constant effort by nature to compensate the loss of one of the senses. When we deal with people, and this is going to be very individualistic, okay? Because some people, deafness has multiple levels, blindness has multiple levels, all of these things have multiple levels, and you cannot just say every deaf person can be done this, every blind person that, because there are multiple levels that one needs to work with very carefully. So the first thing I would say is great caution is required when working in these situations. One has to be very careful about the other person's personal space, because just because somebody cannot hear, or they cannot speak, or they cannot see, doesn't mean that they are not a human being with feelings. So please respect the other person. This is an absolute must when you are trying to work with other people. Now, as we were discussing this, I came upon a very important connection. And that connection is with the sense of touch. Because the sense of touch is based on vibration ultimately. Now, if sound is vibration, the sense of touch is also vibration. And our hands are very, very sensitive. If you look at the neurological makeup of our brain, our hands, both the sensory and motor function, are given the greatest amount, along with the face, the greatest amount of space in the sensory motor cortex. So the amount of sensation that you can feel with your hands, especially the palmar surface, is astonishing. The hands are connected to the heart. Many times I have talked about how the arms are an extension of the heart. And this is why when you want to reach out to somebody and give them a hug, you are connecting heart to heart, not just arm to body, it's heart to heart, because the arms are an extension of the heart. What is the heart center? The heart center is the locus of anahata nada. The nada, the vibration that is not having a cause, the causeless sound. They call it the unstruck sound. I strike and you hear a sound. Now, if there's a sound that has not a cause, it is ahata, anahata. Ahata is, I have done something and there is a sound, but I have not done anything. Nobody has done anything, and yet a sound exists. A sound that exists without a cause, without an origin, without a stimulus, without a striking. That is anahata, which means it is eternal. Anahata nada is eternal. Now that anahata is the heart center. The heart center is connected to your hands. So when you want to work with people who have issues with hearing or other things, but especially hearing was the question that came up here, start to use your hands and their hands. Now, again, please remember, often this requires special training to work with people who have such sensory deficiencies. So don't think that just because I've told you about it, now you are an expert and can jump into it. You need specific training to work with people who have auditory loss, visual loss, and other things. But you could invite them in the appropriate way to place their hands on your voice box, for example, or your chest as you are making the sound. So as you are making the sound, they are feeling the vibration of the sound with their hands, receiving it to the heart center that can perceive the vibration, if not the auditory impulse, the vibrational essence of the sound. So I would say that by utilizing our hands or placing our hands on their chest. Now, again, please be aware of personal space, sexual issues, touch, consent. All of this is to be taken care. You don't just say, Dr. Ananda told me to put my hands on everybody. No, I never said that. I never said that, okay? I said respect the other person's personal space, privacy, and make sure that your touch is always a safe touch and never unsafe touch. This is a must when you are trying to help fellow human beings, irrespective of sexual orientation, irrespective of it. Any human being, please make sure you are very careful when you are using a hands-on approach. But when you use your hands, and if the person's hand is placed on your vocal box and you're talking, as you talk, as you make the sound, they can start to perceive it. As you make the Brahmari, if you put your hands on, say, their ears or the head and let the sound vibrate from you to them, you start to help them perceive the vibration, even if you are not hearing the sound as you hear normally. So these are special conditions, special situations where special approaches will need to be used. And I hope this will give you an outline of what could be a possible answer, and then you could take it forward. But please respect the other person's personal space. If you can take some special training to work with such individuals, please do it so that you can really help people, because the most important part of all therapy is do no harm. Okay, so that is the first part, do no harm. Yes, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir. So that is excellent. And these practices, as you shared, are also very culturally specific. What's appropriate in one culture is not appropriate in another culture. So that's where learning what's culturally accepted, especially if you work with people who come from different backgrounds, religious, cultural, is a must. So that's important. The question that comes now is related to this, because this is a therapist who is doing great efforts to support and help others, but sometimes even the best intention may be misunderstood because the other person is not ready to receive all of the help. So I think that that's an important question. Is it even in our hands to make someone feel at home or understand their trauma and not cause further damage? We might vibrate in our own frequency, spread love, but someone's perception about us is not in our hands. And I've come to a point where I am okay being misunderstood. As a therapist or a doctor, especially, sir, how would you relate to this question?
See, we can only go so far. We are not God. Okay. First thing I think we need to realize, we are not God. And one problem with being a doctor is often many doctors think they are God. And often the patients treat them like God. And so they get this God complex. And then they do something wrong and they then become the devil. In India, that's what happens then. And we get attacked and beaten up in hospitals. So that's the other side. But the God complex is very common when it comes to the medical professionals. And especially surgeons have this very strong thing that they are God, because, they just go in and they cut out body parts, and, you have an appendicitis and I take out your appendix and now you're cured, and see, I've done it all. There's a lot of that. The surgeons especially have a huge amount of ego compared to the rest of the lot of us doctors. But just to come back here, being misunderstood is not such a bad thing, because virtually every great person, every genius has been misunderstood in human history. So being misunderstood, you don't have to be too harsh on yourself about it. And so they said, every genius has been misunderstood. But I like to also add a refrain: just because you're misunderstood doesn't mean you're a genius, okay? It's possible just you are not clear enough. So make sure that you are clear. Second thing is, your intention is only known to you, not to the other person. So you need to communicate your intention. You say, I want to help them. Yeah, you want to help them. Have you ever communicated it in a way that they will understand? I think communication is the key here, because when you want to help someone, if you don't communicate it effectively, they are not going to get the fact that you actually are trying to help them, though you're doing something that is not pleasant. And in therapies, this is a major issue. So one thing I've seen in, again, healthcare professionals, we are not taught communication skills as part of our training. We are not taught it. And so you learn anatomy, physiology, pathology, you go and, you have all of this, but you are expected to learn communication skills on your own. I think that as part of our basic medical training, we should have like a soft core, soft elective on communication skills, because it is a major issue. And now you have books on communication in medicine. Our Vice Chancellor wrote a book, and I have a chapter on bringing salutogenesis into medical communication. How do you communicate salutogenesis in a medical setting? So this has to come in. So communication is a major issue. Now, coming back to another thing, someone who's gone through trauma, and I don't think there's anybody on this planet who hasn't had traumatic experiences. If you are alive and you are anything close to 20, okay, it is guaranteed you have had some form of trauma in your life. It doesn't matter whether you are the Queen of England, Prince Charles. It doesn't matter whether you are our Prime Minister Modi. It doesn't matter who you are. Trauma is part of human life. And it could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be sexual, it could be so many forms. Okay, so when we talk about trauma, it is an individualized experience. So what is traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to another. This is again a very important point to keep in mind. So when we talk about trauma and people are expressing the traumas, it is very easy for us to say, oh, why are they so hung up on that? That's not traumatic at all, because you start to judge them. Now, please understand, it may not be traumatic to you, but for them, it is traumatic. That is why they are expressing it. So when somebody says, I feel traumatized by this, the first point is to accept that in their perspective, they have had a trauma. Do not deny it. Accept it first. The second part is to acknowledge that they have had it, but it is in their hands to work on it, not for the sake of somebody else, but for their own sake. Because the longer we hold on to trauma, the more we hurt ourselves. This is an important message that needs to be communicated, because when we release trauma, we are helping ourselves. It's not about anybody else. And you are not releasing trauma for somebody else's sake. You are releasing it for your own sake. So I'm just putting it in perspective here that when we are dealing with people who are traumatized, they may have had trauma with someone who looks like us. They may have had trauma with someone who talks like us. They may have trauma with someone who, wears glasses. See, we never know it. We never know it. And so we have to be very clear in our communication when we are dealing with people who are trying to work out their traumas. I think the basic key is communication, and to make sure that your intent to help them is well expressed. And the most important, never, never, never judge them. Please. Never, never, never judge them, saying, oh, why are you so hung up on that? That is nothing. Please, never, never, never do that. Because the moment you do that, they will close the wall, the door, and after that, you have lost them and you cannot help them anymore. You have to keep the communication channel open. And the more they communicate, the more you can help them. So more than you talking, you have to let them talk. More than you expressing, you have to let them express. And the use of sound is the best way to release trauma. Sound is the best way to release trauma. Whenever we have pain, why do we go, ah? Not because of the pain. It is an attempt by the body to release the trauma as soon as possible. That is why the body is making the sound. The sound is made, people say, oh, why do you make the sound? Because I felt hurt. No. The body is making you make the sound to release the trauma as soon as possible, because the earlier to release the trauma, the less you harm yourself. The more that trauma is kept in you, the more you are harming yourself. And this is why sound is such an important way. I tell you, one of the best practices for any form of trauma is Brahma Mudra. Because when you do the four sounds, you are creating a very effective release. Another very good practice is Kaya Kriya. Kaya Kriya is one of the best practices to resolve trauma. But in the process of resolving the trauma may resurface. So be alert for that, be aware for that. And if you are not careful, you may be blamed for the trauma resurfacing. You may be blamed for it. So be careful about that. When you are releasing trauma, it may often seem like a new trauma. Again, one has to be very careful about this. It happens when you do these practices. The Hangsa Kriya is another practice which can help release the traumas. But in the process of releasing, what has happened? Something that has been hidden under the ground in the box, in Pandora's box. Now the box has been opened and all of it comes out. And if you are not clear in your communication to the person that these things may surface, it is a surfacing of it for a release to occur. If you have not communicated it, and if you do not know that, what will happen is they're like, oh my God, again I feel like this, and they will shut shop, and then they'll blame you for again traumatizing them like somebody else in the past. With trauma, you have to be very sensitive. And nowadays, everybody's jumping onto this trauma sensitive yoga. Everybody's jumping onto it without knowing what they're talking about. Without knowing what they're talking about. It's not just about some techniques, okay? It is about understanding the other person, accepting that they have been through a trauma, and helping them resolve and release the trauma for their own sake. And in that process, to give them the tools so that similar traumas are not replicated again. Otherwise, what has happened? It is like you have washed, you have a dirty cloth, you have washed it, and you go out and jump in the mud again, you again have dirty cloth. Okay, so while washing the cloth, give them the tools so that they don't jump into the mud again and come back to you with dirty cloth. It is not your job to keep on washing other people's dirty linen. Help them know that the linen is dirty. help them wash it, and give them some awareness on how not to get it dirty again. I have met so many people who have come out of traumas and then gone back into the same type of relationships and again had the same trauma because they were not able to keep away from getting harmed again. See, I'm not saying that they are causing the trauma. What I'm saying is they don't know what's happening. It's like a child. A child needs to be taught safety. Don't put your finger into the electrical socket. Don't go and put your palms on a hot iron. Don't go and put your nose into the fireplace. Children have to be taught this, okay? Similarly, we need to teach the other person how not to fall prey to trauma again. So it's not only the release of the trauma, but helping them not fall prey to it again by becoming a person who can understand the circumstances that are part of the trauma. And it may mean they may have to break up a relationship. They may have to leave a job. They may have to change town. It may be part of it. Because otherwise what happens? Someone is having a trauma in a relationship. They come to you and you help them with all your Brahma Mudra, Kaya Kriya, Hangsa Kriya, all these techniques, and you clear it out, and then they go back into that same relationship. They are not helped, you are not helped. So I think the key here is communication, empathy. Again, I come back to the three components. I used to say two components. Intelligence and empathy are required for a good therapist. I think communication is the third one. These three. You should know what to do, and sometimes you have to know what not to do. There are times the person is not ready to release the trauma yet. Take it slow, take it slow, take it slow. I would like to end with a statement because here they said, I'm okay being misunderstood. This used to happen with my father a lot. Because, Swamiji was someone who, he came into your life or you came into his life, and he changed your life, okay? Your life would never be the same once you came into contact with Swamiji. Same thing with Amma. You come into contact with them and your life's never the same again because it's like you have been hit by lightning, okay? It's pre-Swamiji, post-Swamiji, pre-Ammaji, post-Ammaji. I am not yet there, so don't worry about pre-Ananda and post-Ananda yet. But definitely Swamiji and Amma had that. But Swamiji had this capacity to transform people's lives so much that they hated him for it. And I know of many of Swamiji's old students who, when they talk to me, they say, Dr. Ananda, your father changed my life for the better. I would not be where I am without your father, and I hate him for it. Because he just changed their life so much. They couldn't go back to being that moron they were. They couldn't go back to being that, slug they were. It changed. And it's interesting, actually, the way they say it. Your father changed my life so much, I can never forgive him for it. And I know what that means because he was a surgeon. He was a surgeon who cut the ego into pieces. He sliced through the ego like a hot knife into butter. That's how he sliced into egos and changed lives. But the ego doesn't like to be hurt. Remember that ego noise? It doesn't like to get hurt. And so that part could never forgive him. That part could hate him. But the other part of them realized what a transformation had come into their life. So when you help people, be ready to know that some people may not love you for it. They may hate you for the rest of their life. It's as simple as that. I'll give a small example because Lodika is live with us in class today. And Lodika, for so many of these mothers during delivery, you will do an episiotomy. And the episiotomy will help them from going into third-degree perineal tears. But so many of them are going to hate you for that in their own way. And, there are always going to be people who said, oh, that doctor shouldn't have done this. And, the doctor didn't know what they were doing. This is what happens. But you have saved them from a third-degree perineal tear, which would cause a prolapsed uterus and a prolapsed urinary bladder some 10 years in the future. By that one cut, that episiotomy, you may have done it, but they're going to hate you because you did it. I'm just giving an example which is very relevant to Lotika here. This is an issue that we have. Our dear Lataji in Berlin, as a head nurse, she had to go and tell people, and she was out there and she had to evaluate whether people could continue to get disability pension or not. And now there were people who needed to get back to their life, but they still wanted to be disabled and get pension. So she became the villain of their life because she was making them do what they needed to do. But in the process, no, Lata is the villain. And you get used to it. You say, okay, fine. Because you want them to become the best them, not stay someplace else. As a nurse, as a doctor, as a teacher, you need to have that capacity. So if you are misunderstood, even if people hate you, don't worry about it. You will be satisfied. You have done the best for them, but make sure you communicate with them. Communication is the key, because if you don't communicate, you will always be misunderstood. So if you don't want to be misunderstood, please communicate by being more understanding. If you are more understanding, you will be less misunderstood. I think I stopped there, Sangeeta. We go to the next question.
Wonderful. So the next two questions are about a very interesting topic, which is the performance of ritual mantras at the time of death. So the first one is, what is the use of ritualistic sound at the time of a person's death? How is sound used through mantra to help a soul release from the body? What is done in our parampara? The following question, before I put it in the box, because otherwise it's too much, it is also about this, but it is about memory. So we'll start with this one and then continue with that other one. They're going to get stronger and stronger in intensity, sir. So I'm just warning you that this is about to happen.
Yeah. I just love the fact that I'm getting these questions, okay? This is what my father used to feel bad about. He said, people don't have questions anymore. He said they don't have spiritual questions anymore. People are coming to, he used to say this. He said, people come to me with questions they should ask their lawyer. They come to me with questions they should ask their doctor. They come to me with questions they should ask their, auditing consultant. And they come to the guru and ask those questions. He said, where are the spiritual questions? So he would love these questions. He would love these questions. So I can sense him smiling away behind me right there. You can see him smiling away as he hears these questions. Okay, Swamiji, I'll try. Well, the moment of death is the most important moment of your whole life. The whole life is a preparation for the moment of death. In that moment of leaving the body, we should be as mindful and as conscious as possible. If that happens, we are going to make a leap. A quantum leap is going to occur. If in that moment we are caught up with, I forgot to feed the cat. I don't know if anybody knows where my keys are. What will I do with my Facebook account? If you're caught up with that type of thought, well, I don't think you're going to make a quantum leap. It just doesn't make any sense to me. In our Indian culture, it was believed that one should utter the name of God as one is leaving the body. Hence, often the family would sit around the person who was leaving the body and they would do different chants depending on their propensity, either it would be Shaivite, so they will be chanting related to Om Namah Shivaya, or Om Namo Narayanaya, or Rama Rama Rama, Jai Ram, Shri Ram, or depending on the specificity of that family's affiliations and which side they lean, the Shiva, the Shakti, the Rama, the Krishna, the Vishnu. Often the chant of Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti is used. Often the Trayambakam Yajamahe, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushte Vardhanam Urva Rukamiva Bandhanat Mrityor Mokshiyamamritat. This would be intoned. This is a very important one which would be intoned. And in fact, some other time I'll share a story on that, but here I'm trying to focus on something else. These were part of it. The other trick that Indian culture gave us was name your children after the gods. So if you have called your child Rama, Krishna, Govinda, Shiva, Hari, most probably when you are leaving the body and you want to call out to somebody, most probably you call out to your children and you're like, Rama, Rama, or Shiva, Shiva. So while you're leaving the body, you are actually chanting the name of God, though you may have been thinking of your son, daughter, whatever it may be. This was a small trick that was put into the culture. Now, if you start calling people, Inky, Pinky, Ponky, it's not going to have that same effect. Okay. So that doesn't work nowadays as good as it used to be. In the Rishi culture tradition, Swamiji has taught us the importance of the breath coming through the Trikuti, which is the 10th chakra at the top of the head, right here. And that breath comes down to the base of the spine. And as you breathe out, it goes up and out the Trikuti. So the Trikuti, Bindu and Trikuti chakra is the center through which you want to let that last breath of life go out. So a lot of focus was on, as you breathe out, you feel the breath going up the spine and out the top of the head. So this was given great importance in this tradition. And when you look at all the different polarity practices, when you do the Anuloma Viloma, and when you start doing the different practices and then the Mantralaya and all, in the Mantralaya at the end, what we do is that we do this, on the exhalation, we let the sound go up, out the top of the head, and we hold in the space beyond the top of the head. So what you are doing is you are training yourself that when that final exhalation occurs, you go that same pathway, because that pathway has become an expressway by your practice. So in this tradition, a lot of importance was placed on letting the breath out through the Trikuti, which is the Kali chakra. It is called Kali chakra also, because Kali, my father used to say, is the divine midwife. She is the one who sits up there and says, okay, it's time for you to be born again. So Kali as the divine midwife is a term Swamiji used to use for this Trikuti, which is also called Kali chakra. And if you are not evolved enough, ready enough, she will not let you go through that. She'll say, no, you have to go and get born again and work out. It's not your time yet. And then you have to work and come. But if you have worked on it, if you have done what needs to be done, do the first things first. When the last thing comes, you're going to do it properly. So a lot of importance was placed on that. And whenever we do these practices, we are using the Mantralaya on a repeated basis. And that repeated basis is giving you the power to streamline this flow of energy up the Sushumna and out the top of the head through what is called the Trikuti, the 10th chakra. So more importance is placed on the breath rather than the sound in that way. Of course, if not any other sound, the Om is the universal Maha Mantra. The Rama Nama is often said to be the Taraka Mantra, which is a very good mantra to be used. But when Swamiji was in the hospital, this was the 28th of December, I came back from my medical school. I came back, I saw him in the hospital in the ICU, and came back on 28th night, 28th of December, to be in Pondicherry, where early morning 29th, we were doing a ritual where we were chanting the Trayambakam Yajamahe. And it was only later, after the puja, the homa, the fire ceremony, that I took the bus and went to Chennai, that I came to know that he had left his body at 2:20 in the morning while we were doing the Trayambakam Yajamahe as part of the fire ceremony. So I was in Pondicherry doing the fire ceremony where we were chanting the Trayambakam Yajamahe, and that was the moment he was leaving the body in the ICU. Now, in the ICU, you cannot be sitting around chanting Trayambakam Yajamahe. So there is a very strong purpose behind that. To my mind, this mantra can be used in two ways. One is as a mantra to help the person back from near death. Then it help them by mantra to help them pass to a higher stage. One more. The internet was playing up a bit. I just see a better connection. I'm going to repeat it again. So I think now the connection is better. So I'll repeat it again. That was just the internet god saying, Dr. Ananda, shut up. You know that happens. Those of you who know me, you know that whenever I'm saying something that I'm not supposed to tell, the internet gods strike me down. It happens again and again. But I'm going to say it again because you're not just anyone, okay? All of you are here for a purpose. So nothing wrong in sharing with you. When we do the Trayambakam Yajamahe, the Mahamrityunjaya, for someone who is in a near-death situation, either it can help them come back from that near-death, and you may save a life, but it can also be an effective tool if the person leaves the body to make that quantum leap into a higher level of consciousness. So it has two-pronged approach. And that is why whenever somebody is in a hospital, whenever somebody is battling for life, we often start chanting this. Because one is you may bring them back if the karma is so. We are subject to karma. Terms and conditions apply. Those asterisks with terms and conditions. The term and condition is karma is the terms and conditions. So if that karma is such, your chanting at that time can actually bring them back. And if the karmic situation is for them to actually leave the body, they leave in such a way they can make that quantum leap to a higher evolutionary life in the next one. Because as far as Indian culture goes, this is not the only lifetime. There have been many before, there will be many after. So we are not worried about just this lifetime. I think I'll stop there for now, but it depends on different cultures, different conditions. One thing I must actually tell you, because when I was with my dear Hamsananda in the Gitananda ashram in Italy, I remember on one of my trips, we had a long talk because they are training sannyasins in the Giri order. So he has taken that part of my father's teachings of, training sannyasins to take the message forward. And they actually train the sannyasin and others to go to the people in the hospitals who are dying to help them chant some of these mantras in the end life situation. And I was talking to her about it because I said, I don't think anybody does it here in India. I don't know of any swamis or any pandits who go into the hospital to chant for people who are dying. it sort of doesn't happen in India. I said, this is very odd. She says, see, this is part of our Western approach, that normally when somebody is dying, the priest, would go and meet them and all of this would be there. So people are used to that. And then, they come into the Hindu way of life. And she said, then suddenly there's a vacuum. When they're leaving the body, there's nobody there. So she said, we have to fulfill this vacuum, which in India you have not addressed, but here we have to address. It was a very interesting thought I had because, unless the person is dying at home and the family can bring, the pandit or somebody home, you normally don't find people going into hospitals to help people die. It's just not there. So it was a very interesting learning for me. And I do think it's a place that we can actually work on. At Saita in the hospital, we are next to the palliative ward. And many of the people in palliative ward, they are going to die very soon. And our students and our therapists often go there and, spend time with them. And that time that they spend with that person is actually of great value to that person in those last days of their life. So I think this is another place that as a yoga therapist, as a yoga teacher, we should actually explore going into palliation where people are in that terminal end life situations. Can we help them die with dignity? Can we help them die in a sense of greater peace and ease? I think this would be a very great service. If any of you sort of has that incline, it would actually be a very great service to do because we are helping fellow human beings. Yes, Sangeeta. Next question, please.
Thank you so much, sir. And yes, some of the hospitals in Italy, for example, they have access to a chaplain. Some hospitals have chapels, which is good. It is a bit unfortunate that there's not a lot of diversity in what's offered, so that if people are Muslims or Hindu or Jews, for example, in Italy, they would just only have access to a Catholic chaplain. But at the same time, I think the vibratory power of prayer can be helpful if the chaplain is prepared to be inclusive in their intention, of course. So even training chaplains with that awareness would be wonderful. So thank you so much, sir. And thank you thank you so much for sharing about Swamiji's passing, which is very intimate.
I was just thinking, Sangeeta, this may be something that our people in the Gitananda ashram can take up, because I know that Hamsananda does a lot of interfaith community work. They have a lot of meetings where people from different faith come together. So they have, the Catholics, the Jesuits, the Buddhists, and they often have these meetings. And she is very active in that. So this may be something that can come out of that, where, either you have people who can be brought in, or people who are already in are given a sort of a more inclusive approach. It would be interesting to take it. So I think that's a beautiful thought.
Yes, it's beautiful. And again, the chaplain or the person in charge doesn't need to learn how to speak a language. We'll have some questions about the proper pronunciation of mantra in a minute after this question, actually. But anyways, yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done so that we are more open-minded about this. Okay, so the next question is also about the body leaving, the soul leaving the body. Tibetan Buddhist masters teach that after the moment of death, having passed through the process of leaving the physical body, one might revisit moments of one's life. My question is about memory and memories. Where in our being are these stored while in the body and after?
Well, according to the Yoga Darshana, these are stored as our samskara and vasana patterns. So the actual answer to this question is samskara vasana. That is where all these memories are stored. And it is the samskara vasanas that then carry us into the next lifetime, where those past memories can then be worked out. This is actually the continuity that is there is occurring because of the samskara vasana complex. So the actual answer is samskara vasana. So what is samskara? Samskara is basically our habitual patterns. So the habitual patterns basically are the samskara. Vasanas are the tendencies that are existing in us. Now, often these two become a bit, there's a lot of gray between them. Samskara is a habitual pattern. So what you do again and again, Ammaji used to tell us, samma means same, kara is to do. So samskara is when you do the same thing again and again. Samskara, samaskara. I don't know whether it's grammatically correct, but it's beautiful concept. When you kara, do the same thing, sama, same thing again and again, it becomes a samskara. Whereas a vasana is a tendency that you have. So these tendencies to do something. We have a tendency to be stupid. We have a tendency to be, jumping in front of trucks. We have a tendency to take risks. We have a tendency to stay put where we are and not do what we need to do. These are often tendencies. So the tendencies and the habitual patterns are entwined. So the samskara vasana complex is leading to actually the karmic manifestation. So karma is tied to the samskara vasana. So if the question comes, where do these memories reside? They are constantly being put into the samskara vasana pattern, which is eternal. It is, I'm not getting the exact verse in the Yoga Sutra, but tasam, it comes. I have to find that out. There's a beautiful verse that actually gives this. Eka rupatvat. There is a continuity, a oneness that occurs because of the samskara vasana. So that is the answer. And there are a lot of stories about, people leaving the body and then looking at themselves while people are around them crying and things like that. But actually, nobody who's died has really lived to tell us the actual story. So what we have is a lot of hypothesis, a lot of conjecture. And if someone were to say, I died and I came back, most probably they would be sent to a psychiatrist rather than people believing them. This is just how society is. But we have a full Upanishad called the Kathopanishad. That is Markandeya and Yamaraja dialogue. After Markandeya has died and gone to, well, he doesn't really die in that way, but he goes to Yama's domain. So it does talk about a lot of this stuff. So Kathopanishad is an Upanishad. And I know in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis on dying and, after dying and all of that. So I'm not knowledgeable of that side, but the answer to this is samskara vasana.
Thank you, sir.
So how do you break samskara vasana? How do you break samskara vasana? By utilizing the power of choice in the present moment to stop doing the same thing again and again, and to start contemplating the tendencies you have. Why is it you do what you are doing? Start analyzing it and stop doing the same stupid thing again and again. Because Swamiji used to say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome. If you do the same thing again and again, the outcome is going to be the same. So if you want a different outcome, start doing something different. The power of choice, viveka, khyati, buddhi, buddhi, buddhi. Yes, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir. The next question is about the right pronunciation of mantra, which I think you have addressed already in several scintillating Saturdays. This also involves another question on misappropriation. So perhaps how much effect of Sanskrit words is lost when not pronounced properly? Every day I chant mantras and mispronounce them, despite that I know it's hard to correct, and I wonder what effect that has.
The most important part of a mantra, the most important part of a mantra is the intent with which it is chanted. I want that to be very clear. The most important part of a mantra is the intent with which it is chanted. The second important part is the pronunciation. I put intent above pronunciation because you may be chanting something wrong, but if your intent is pure, the divine will understand what you are saying. A simple example, anyone who's had small children, your children start to talk and they are mispronouncing what they are saying, yet you as their mother, father, aunt, grandmother, you understand them perfectly because of the intent that is there, the love that is there. You don't tell your child, unless you pronounce it properly, I'm not going to feed you. You know what they mean, okay? Because you have understood the intent. The divine is our loving mother, our loving father, our loving grandmother, our loving grandfather, our loving uncle, aunt. So if our intent is pure, the divine will reciprocate our love. Now it is important, the second important is pronunciation, because if I want to call Lata ji, I have to say Lata. But if I say Shailaja, Shailaja is going to say, yes, Dr. Ananda, you called me. Lata is not going to respond. So it is important that I am close to it. Okay, the pronunciation, what I'm trying to say here is the pronunciation should be as close to it as possible, so that when I'm calling Lata, Lata knows I'm calling her. When I call Sandhya, Sandhya knows I'm calling her. When I call Lotika, she knows I'm calling her. So it may not be perfect, but it should be close enough for the right response to be evoked. Now, of course, the perfect situation, utopian situation, would be perfect intent, perfect pronunciation. That is utopian. Okay, because I do not pronounce everything correctly. I don't do it, and I know it. And, this is part of my genetic structure. Because the genetic structure which Swamiji had, half Irish, Ammaji had, which was American, we have a tongue that is thick. Now, if you have a thick tongue, the way you pronounce things will be different than if you can have a thin, long tongue, which is a typical Indian genetic trait. So someone with a thick tongue is never going to be able to pronounce things the way a thin, long tongue can pronounce it. It's as simple as that. But with your thick, short tongue, how close to it can you get? That is what matters. And otherwise, it is all about a power hierarchy that, oh, if you don't chant it perfectly, blah, blah, blah. That is power hierarchy. That is a, just power one-upmanship. You should be close enough to it. If you say Om, it is important that you say Om and not Mo. Okay, if you are saying Mo, it's not Om, okay? Of course, in Japa, the cows got it right. Okay? The cows got it right because they go Mo, 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 Mo. So Mo becomes Om, Om as they chant it. Okay, so the cow Mo, 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 Mo. You got Om, like Va, Siva, Siva, Siva. That is a trick in Japa that is used. You should be making an attempt. The attempt is important. The intent is important. And then comes the content. So intent first, content second. Because I know of a lot of non-Indian people who chant not so perfectly, but the intent is so pure that the God comes and stands in front of them. And I know a lot of Indian traditional chanters who, while they are chanting perfectly, are thinking about how much they're going to make that day. And the mind is on the money that somebody is going to give them and not the deity they are chanting for. Typical story here. I know that. I know these people personally, and I know Even while they are chanting for you, they're busy thinking how much they're going to get out of you at the end of the day. Now, that mantra, though it's perfectly chanted, is hopeless. It's hopeless. It's a bounced check. It's a bounced check. And that is why the ideal situation is when you can have pure intent with as correct a pronunciation as possible within your linguistic limits. There are limits to our linguistics. Try to get close to it. Try to get close to it.
Thank you,
And
sir.
whatever you think you can correct, try to correct it. I saw that it's hard to correct. Well, try to correct it as much as you can. As a child, I had problems with something. I worked on it. I was able to correct it. Even now, I keep refining myself because I was listening to my Saturday's talk on asana, and I found that I have mispronounced something in one of the aspects. So today I have been repeating it about 33 times today so that I get it right. When I talk about Dvandva Anabhigata, it's Anabhigata, that Anabhigata, not Anabhi, that, that I was telling people about the long A, short A, and I was making a mistake in it. So today when I listen to it, I am correcting myself because I realized when I listen to it, no, that doesn't sound correct. So how can I make it sound correct? 33 times I've been working on it. So try to work on yourself that way. Work on yourself. We are all a work in progress. I don't know if you think you're perfect, but I don't. I don't think I'm perfect at all. No questions about it. I tell Amma that I know I'm not perfect and I'm happy about it. And just a question that came with that, a mantra should first be chanted externally so that you can be corrected. Okay, you chant it externally for the sake of correction. Once you are close to it, you chant internally. Because if you are chanting it internally, I have no idea whether you are chanting the mantra or singing a film song from the latest James Bond title song. I have no idea what you are doing in your head, okay? Okay, I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know what you are doing. So if you chant it externally, at least I know what you are doing. So it's useful, especially in teaching, it is very useful to have people chant out loud so you can correct people. Yes, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir. Just a note that is interesting for our non-Indian, non-Sanskrit speaking participants is that when I was at the ashram and I was learning to sing Carnatic music, I remember that I got corrected quite a bit because the teacher would say, don't pronounce it ta, pronounce it ta, and I just couldn't hear it. And it took months. But the process of that requires also a letting go of one's personality in saying, like, I can hear this and this is what I do. So it's a cultural transformation. So the neuroplasticity that you were mentioning in a previous teaching is that's an opportunity to open new pathways for listening and awareness. So at the same time, right? And it's also a humble offering of oneself to the teachings of a different culture. So no excuse, right? Like no excuse. Like if you have to practice it 30 times, imagine what we have to do. And sometimes you just don't hear it. You just don't hear the sounds, and it's okay. You just keep at it, but use that as a practice rather than as a problem. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, the next question.
I just wanted to add in here, Sangeeta, because there are a few interesting stuff. Because, we made this Yoga Sutra chanting CD. Sangeeta, Devasena, Meena, and myself have chanted it. And even to this day, it's one thing that I'm so satisfied with. It's beautiful. And Sangeeta put a lot of time to get the auto honking out of it because our audio engineer, sound engineer couldn't hear the sound of the autos honking because he was so used to it, he couldn't hear it, whereas she was hearing it. There's an interesting aspect that you can only see that which you're looking for. You can only hear that which you're looking for. If you're not looking for it, if you don't know what you are searching, you cannot find it. It's a very important part of sensory perspectives. But I remember when I sent it to one of my friends in Delhi, I thought he would like it. And he was like, oh, if Sanskrit scholars heard it, they would be very critical of the way you have chanted it. And I'm like, seriously, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, okay? I don't claim to be that. But, where does it come from? What does it contain? And all he could think about was, a few words were not correct. And, people get into this stuck and you never know why they do it. Is it a sense of insecurity in them that they just don't want somebody else to do something? This was a very big issue I've had. And I remember as a child, one of my musical colleagues telling one of my friends, because he used to come to my music master to learn singing. And often he would come in and it would be the end of my class, or, I would go in when his class was ending. And he told one of my friends, he said, tell Anand that he better take up some instruments, you'll never get it, which was not really nice of him, but anyway, that was there. And that does hurt you at times, okay? That does hurt you. And interestingly, 20 years later, I'm on stage performing, and at the end of the performance, I come over and this person basically lies down on the ground appreciating the performance. And it was a very, very important moment for me to realize, not I'm greater than him, or, oh, I have been vindicated, but the fact that in those 20 years, I had been able to work on myself enough to go from the status of Ananda should give up singing and focus on instrument to Ananda is able to sing enough to be appreciated. I think, this is the growth you want to make. You want to make that growth. Again, it's not to prove him wrong, but to improve where I am. Again, it's not about proving anybody wrong. It's about you improving yourself so that you are slowly chipping away all that which needs to be chipped away. There's a mistake, chip it away. That's what my music master did. That is what Swamiji did. That's what Ammaji did. That's what Lakshman sir did. That is the role of a teacher, is to chip away at those parts that need to be chipped, help the student learn to chip them away so that the student becomes what they can be. That is part of the evolution. So we are all a work in progress. Yes, Sangeeta.
Yes, this, oh my God, this could go on and on. But I also remember, and I think it's useful for our participants who have not come to the ashram and who have not come to India to understand this parampara. Because I remember when taking Carnatic singing, I used to take classes with Divya and other children. I was at the children level. And, I was this big academic coming from New York, right? Blah, blah, blah. And I remember saying like, oh my God, I'm taking classes with people who are like young people, like 3-4-year-old. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing this? I'm never going to get good at this and blah, blah. But I remember how the audience was so enthusiastic. Like the parents of the children could not believe that this grown woman, would be taking classes with their children. And the level of joy and respect that I saw truly motivated me to study. And this is one of the gifts of this parampara. I feel that one of the many gifts is that it's okay to make mistakes. So even for those of us who are worrying about cultural misappropriation, is this a problem? How are we going to do it? Are we doing it wrong? Or, should we just quit it? Is that in this parampara, there's what it's truly called a safe space. It's true. It's in this place right here, because nobody's expecting us to be perfect, just with good intention, as Dr. Sir said. So I just wanted to, I just wanted to share that. But now, sir, so now we're getting into the Bindus. Okay, Bindu has been said to be nada coalescing to a point. How exactly does this relate to ekagrata, the bringing one's focus to a point? Does ekagrata cause nada to coalesce to a point? And how does all of this relate to samyama? Samyama, we were told in class, parallels laya, the returning to nad. But samyama, as we know from Patanjali, is also a means by which siddhi are produced. What determines which of these different results will come from samyama? And a separate question about Bindu was also, is Bindu same as Shakti, or does Shakti perceive Bindu? Oh boy.
Well, I think I did something like 11 morning sessions during the first lockdown on Bindu. I think it was 11 sessions are there because there's just so much on it. But let me put it in a simplistic way here. Samyama is the recipe by which the all scattered mind learns to focus and then transcend itself. So the scattered mind, which is all scattered, sarvartha. Sarvartha means you are thinking of everything at the same time. So scattered. Sarvartha, ekagratayo. You are starting to bring it into a single pinpoint focus. So it is like the light that is scattered. Scattered light is good for you to see, but that's all you can do. When you focus the light together, you have a laser beam. So just as light which is scattered can only help you see, it cannot focus. But when you focus it, it starts to have power, laser beam focus. So the whole process of samyama is for the all-pointed mind to become one-pointed. From that one-pointed mind, you go to a state where you actually go into the no mind state. So we can play with it by saying you go from mindless to mindful to no mind. That is actually how the growth is occurring here. When we talk about Bindu, Bindu is a focal point of consciousness that is like the opening that enables us to perceive what lies behind the screen. It's a pinhole that gives you an opportunity to perceive reality that lies behind the screen, like the Matrix. Matrix Resurrection, I haven't yet seen, but it's on my to see list soon. You are on this side, that is the color. You want to know what is the nad. So in between lies the Bindu. It is that pinpoint through which you look and you, that is what nad is like. But to look through the pinpoint, you need to have ekagrata. Because if you don't have ekagrata, you only see the screen, you don't see the pinpoint. I hope I'm making sense here. I'm bringing it to a very simplistic way. This is how I understand it and I'm sharing it. So wherever nad condenses to a point, it is an opportunity for color to occur. We who are in color, whenever we focus our mind into a point, we get to Bindu and we can perceive nad that lies behind it. So the creation is occurring from Nada Bindu Kala. But when you want to understand Nad, you go from Kala to Bindu by Ekagrata, which is Samyama. Why do the Siddhis occur because of Samyama? Because your mind has become powerful. At one point, mind is so powerful, whatever you choose to focus upon, a Siddhi occurs. When your mind is not powerful, the Siddhi doesn't occur. And when you can focus on the Bindu, the Siddhi that will be there is you understand Nad itself. Now, Patanjali and us that you can focus your mind on Bindu, you will understand Nad. This is one way to think about it. Coming back here, results are different what you choose to focus upon. Maharishi Patanjali is very second. I'm just checking up one thing. I think there was an issue with the connection. Does it seem okay now, the connection? Okay, fine, because it seemed to have disappeared for a few moments. Yeah. Basically, what you choose to focus upon is the prime factor in what is created. So in samyama, it is based on empowering the mind to become one-pointed. That one-pointed mind, based on where you focus it, the result occurs. So depending on what you focus upon, different siddhis come. Now here in this context, you are focusing on Bindu. So when you focus on Bindu, you understand the primordial vibration that lies behind. Is Bindu the same as Shakti? This is a beautiful question. I would say that Bindu is definitely close to Shakti. I'll put it that way. And I'm going to justify this. The Bindu is the point where the unmanifest becomes manifest. Just as the unmanifest life becomes manifest thanks to the mother. Of course, the father also contributes. That is why Purusha is consciousness. But the one who goes through the process of birthing is the mother, not the father. Jananam is feminine. That is why Janani is the maternal principle. Jananam, Janani. Ja means to give birth. So the Bindu is the point from where birth is occurring. There is Nad, vibration. The Bindu is where it coalesces and then birth occurs. So definitely Shakti is related to the Bindu, no doubt about it. Whether it is one and the same, I would have to think a bit more on it. Shakti is definitely part of the Bindu. And that Bindu is also related to the first cell which creates us, the seed. That is why I said Bindu is also the bija. It is also the seed of the manifest. So definitely Shakti is there, because if the seed doesn't have life, there's not going to be birth. See, you can plant 10,000 seeds in the ground, but if the life force is not there, nothing's going to come. You have a crop failure. So for the Bindu to manifest in Kala, there has to be that power which is Shakti, which is also Prana. Shakti, Prana, the life force. And again, then the question comes, what are these Bindus? Well, Sapta Bindus in the cranial vault and others. When we start to work, on the Bindu Dharana, the different Bindus that are there from the base of the spine, coming up, the base of the spine, the navel, the heart center, the throat center, the tip of the nose, the midpoint of the eyebrows, and then all the internal Bindus. When we focus on these Bindus, what we are doing is we are creating an opportunity to move from the manifest to the unmanifest. That is what the Bindu sadhana is all about. And there are those 10 or 11 videos which I've gone exhaustively into the Bindu, so I don't want to do that. But how does the meditator or yoga practitioner use these points? By utilizing these as focal points, you are starting to connect with pure energy, pure consciousness that lies behind the manifestation. So that is the clue that is happening here. Is the connection better now in the sense
yes,
of...
it's great, sir. It's great. Okay, sir. So I'm just being mindful that it's past the 90 minutes. Do you want to stretch it to 2 hours? Do you want to take a couple more questions? We can always maybe schedule a separate session later.
No, we have a few more questions.
Oh yeah, there are quite a few more.
No,
Okay.
we'll do as many as we can, because see, once we go into module 2, it will not make sense to really come back to these questions. So I want to get them done before we start module 2.
Okay. So here's, oh, just 1 second, please. For some reason, this is not copying. Okay, I'm just going to read it and then try to copy it in a separate moment because it's not letting me. My question regards the Pancha Kosha and Nada. Dr. Sir said that Nada is at the layer of causal existence, Karana Sharira, and that the embodiment of causality itself is Nada, but also that it is the vibrational essence of the universe, the Parabrahman. So my question is the Karana Sharira considered to be the same as the Atman? My prior understanding has been that the causal body is the most subtle of the 5 sheets, the storehouse of karma and the seed of rebirth, that it is what connects the individual and the universal, but that it is part of the jiva. In the yoga step-by-step, Swamiji does not say very much about the Ananda Maya Kosha, but he says, greater than all of the others is the Ananda Maya Kosha, the sheath of bliss, which engulfs all of the lower bodies, permeating them with bliss. Perhaps I also wonder about the Vijnana Maya Kosha being described as intellect. Does this mean reason, analytical thought? My Western cultural background that values reason and facts over emotion and intuition, mind over heart, seems very limited. I'm going to try to, but the question therefore is the Karana Sharira considered to be the same as the Atman? To start, we can start with that one, perhaps, sir.
The Karana Sharira traditionally is related to Anandamaya Kosha. So this is how we normally correlate it. The Stula Sharira with Annamaya Kosha, the Sukshma Sharira with Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Karana Sharira with Anandamaya. This is the normal correlation between these two concepts of Kosha and Sharira. Now, where does the Atma come into it? Well, the Atma is going through all of them. Because the Atma is not different than the body. The Atma is not different than the emotions. That Atma is not different than the mind. The Atma is not different than the intellect. But the Atma is percolating every part of this, yet the Atma itself is also something beyond it. So it's like it permeates everything and it's slightly beyond when you talk about Atma. So we cannot limit the Atma to even the Annamaya Kosha, because the Atma has to be something which is all the Koshas plus something. To clarify this, the Purusha Suktam, which is a beautiful chant, it actually talks about this, and it says that Purusha is 12 Dasha Angulam, 10 finger breadths beyond the manifest universe. That the Purusha, which is the pure consciousness, Atma is another word. So Purusha is the Sankhya Yoga terminology. Atma is the Vedantic terminology. This is just to give you a slight difference here. Of course, Swamiji accepted Atma as a yoga terminology also. But because normally yoga and Sankhya are put together, they use the term Purusha and Ishvara. Purusha and Ishvara, as opposed to Vedanta, which talks about Atma. So coming back here, the Atma is going to percolate everything, but it is also going to be slightly beyond it, just like that Purusha is said to be 10 finger breadths beyond the manifest. When I was studying with Swamiji, officially in 1991, 92, 93, for those 2 years, my understanding at that time was Anandamaya Kosha was the highest and went all the way totally. That was my understanding at that time, and that it is from the Vijnanamaya Kosha onwards that it is you. This was how I understood it. But then many years later, when I was in the USA with Rajudev in California, and we were going through many of Swamiji's teaching, the notes he had, what I realized was the Anandamaya Kosha is still you. Okay, so the Anandamaya Kosha is still you, but it is the one that is sort of the layer that is closest to what could be called the Atma. And I will give you a metaphor, a visual image for this. Imagine there is a container with water. Now, the whole container has water in it, but that water is made up of countless drops. Okay, theoretically, only when it comes out separate, does it become a drop. But all the drops have coalesced together to create the wholesomeness. Okay. Now, each of those drops, now imagine you have the ocean, okay, any body of water. You have this huge body of water made up of uncountable individual drops. Now, each drop has its outermost layer that makes it a drop. You know, when you look at a water drop, you know, there's the outermost layer, the outermost membrane. So imagine you have this huge amount of water, uncountable number of drops, and each drop has its outer layer. Now that outer layer of that drop is connecting it to the whole. Do I still have all of you, or have I lost you? Huh? So the outermost layer of the drop is connecting it to the wholesomeness of the ocean. But that outermost layer of the drop enables it to retain its identity as a drop. That outermost layer of the drop that enables it to be a drop in the ocean is your Anandamaya Kosha. So the outermost layer of you that still is you, but yet is making up the wholesome experience of the whole universe. This is the closest I can come to giving you an answer for this. So, and if you take it into cellular biology, we have each cell has a cell membrane. That cell membrane delineates that individual cell as an individual cell, yet that cellular membrane is constantly connected with the wholesomeness of you so that it can function in a holistic manner. Every one of our trillions of cells is functioning as you, but retaining its identity by virtue of the cellular membrane. That cellular membrane is what our Anandamaya Kosha is. So our Jivatma, as opposed to the Paramatma, the individual, as opposed to the cosmos, the drop, as opposed to the ocean. What is it that connects the drop to the ocean? Its outer membrane. What connects us to the cosmic pure consciousness? Our Anandamaya Kosha. This is the only way I can answer this. And I've tried my best in terms that I understand. This is how I have tried to understand this concept myself. And compared to where I thought Anandamaya Kosha is already the ocean, I realized the Anandamaya Kosha is still the drop. And of course, we have to remember that we are not just the drop in the ocean, but we are the ocean in a drop. So the same applies here also. Anandamaya Kosha is an experience. When you lose that sense of you, you're still doing what you're doing, but you are not doing it anymore. At that moment, you experience Anandamaya Kosha. I think the most I've ever experienced it is while I'm teaching and while I'm singing. There's that moment where I'm teaching, but I am not teaching anymore. It's just the teaching is happening. For me, that is an Anandamaya Kosha experience. When I'm singing, and I am singing, yes, you can see me singing, you can hear me singing, but I am not singing anymore. It's just the singing. That is an Anandamaya Kosha experience. It can happen when you're dancing. It can happen when you're cooking. It can happen when you're gardening. It can happen while you are surgically removing a tumor from a patient. That moment where you have just merged into the bigger picture. Yes, Sangeeta.
Okay. A question I have here pertains to how the Soham mantra meditation links with the Hangsa Kriya taught in the yoga step-by-step course with Ida Team 52.
It's actually the same. It's actually the same. This is where the Hangsa Kriya brings into practice the concept of the Soham mantra. See, normally, the Soham mantra is a conceptual framework for most people. But the Hangsa Kriya actually brings it into an actual practice. And in that practice, you start to actually find that balance. And that is why it is a practice to work out your karma. Because what has happened is that karma is basically an interplay between the inspiration and the expiration. Karma is an interplay between the universality and the individuality. And when that is brought into a practice, that practice is the Hangsa Kriya. So I would just say it is actually a practical application of the Soham mantra. It is like, what was the other one? There was something the other day I had, it's slipped my mind right now, but there was another one where everybody talks of this concept and then you actually have a practice in Swamiji's teachings. So, everybody talks about the Soham mantra and, understanding the Saha coming in and the Ham going out. And, it's all up there in the intellect. Someone talked about the Vijnanamaya Kosha and intellect. Vijnanamaya Kosha, we use the term intellect. It is that component of us that has discernment. So the discerning part of us is actually what the Vijnanamaya Kosha is. Because when you use the word intellect and intellectual, it sort of seems a bit snobbish, has that snobbish tendency over these intellectuals who look down upon everyone. That's not the Vijnanamaya Kosha. Vijnanamaya Kosha is where discernment is there, the capacity to know the real from the unreal, the capacity to know the right from the wrong, the capacity to make choices. That is the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So we use the term intellectual sheath or intellectual level of existence. I think I have to start changing that into discerning part of us, or discernment is the actual term for Vijnanamaya Kosha, where you can actually see things as they are. Vijnanamaya Kosha is where you wake up and you see things as they are and you start to do something about it. Yes, Sangeeta.
Wonderful. So about karma, if karma's consequences manifest in pain and suffering, then how can we correlate innocent children who die at birth or suffer in their lifetime for doing no mistakes or having no bad karma and need to endure suffering?
This is a question that comes up a lot. This question comes up a lot. And all I can say is, when we realize that this is not the only lifetime we have had, this is not the only lifetime we will ever have. If we realize that, then the answer is already there. So the child who is just born, we talk about, oh, you do something and you have the karma for it. So what did the child do? Well, the only way to understand is the continuity of samskara vasana from lifetime to lifetime, bringing the experiences that may be painful or not painful. So the only way to understand it is to understand the continuity of lifetime after lifetime. Otherwise, there's no way to understand it. There's always the question, why do good people suffer? Well, it depends on how you define good people. So that's also a big issue there, because everybody feels they are good and that they suffer. So it's again one of those issues. But if you look at the bigger picture, that's why we are not blessed with the perspective. We are not blessed with that perspective to know the past and the future lifetimes. But again, Maharishi Patanjali tells us, through aparigraha, janma katamta sambodha, you can start to have this when you start to establish yourself in aparigraha. Through aparigraha, you start to understand why things are connected, how they are connected, because you have become safe and the universe will give you that information. But if you only look at one lifetime, there's no way you can understand this. This will not have an answer if you only look at one lifetime.
Okay. Here's a question. How might our level, intensity of attention and awareness affect our cognitive abilities to define a sound? To ask it another way, is there a difference in the quality of awareness when a person only hears pure sound rather than cars driving down the road, or a mallet on a bell, etc.?
Well, we hear pure sound. Okay, we hear pure sound. But then due to our conditioning, our education, and our life experience, we start to put a phrase to it. We start to put a terminology to it. We start to put images to it, and we start to become prejudiced about it. So I think what is very important here is, it's like, when someone says hello, depending on whether that is a person you like or you don't like, your perception of the hello is going to be different. Someone who you like says hello, you're going to feel happy. Somebody who you know is out to get you says hello, you are like, oh my God, what's in store today for me? So your perception changes. And I think this is why the importance of wiping our memory clean. When Patanjali talks about samadhi, in the Samadhi Pada, he says, you are contemplating different aspects as part of your cognitive focus. In the Samprajnata Samadhi, it is all cognitive process. You are contemplating different things. So initially you have Vitarka, Vichara, Samadhi. Vitarka is the external things you are contemplating. Vichara are the internal things, subtle. In the Vitarka, Vichara, there is Savichara and Nirvichara. So with gross thought, without gross thought. So they say, how do you go without gross thought? You have wiped your memory clean. He says you have to clean your memory so that you are perceiving something as it is without any bias. So initially, when I contemplate, say I contemplate a picture of Lord Shiva. Now I'm contemplating Lord Shiva. That is a vitarka. I have chosen an image to contemplate, so I can get into a vitarka, savitarka samadhi, where I am in samadhi with the image of Shiva that I have chosen to contemplate. But then when I take it deeper, that savitarka becomes nirvitarka when I even stop knowing that it is Shiva and the essence of that image and me have become one. So what you have to do is you have to wipe your memory clean. It's like you have a pen drive. You have a pen drive, a USB, and you put it into your computer and it has your name on it and it has your files. Now you format it. Now when you put it in, there's no name, there is no file, it is unrecognizable. Same thing Patanjali is saying. He says you have to format your hard drive. So he says first learn to contemplate something. You will get into the oneness with it, but there will be all the junk files there. You format the whole drive and now you are one with the essence. The same thing happens here when you contemplate sound. The first association is you will say, oh, they said hello. Then the second association, oh, it is in English. And then the third, it was said by so and so. And then all the associations, I like this person, I don't like this person, and all of that comes in. And then what happens is you have lost your focus. You have lost your focus because you have got lost in all the paraphernalia that is happening. And now you are not focused on the hello, the sound anymore. It is like when you listen to music. Are you listening to music or are you listening to your favorite musician? See, if you are listening to music, it doesn't matter who's playing it, you are going to enjoy it. But then you start to say, I will listen to it, but it has to be my favorite musician. And then the moment you listen to it, you are not listening to the music anymore. You are thinking of that musician and all the stories associated with that musician. You have stopped listening to the music now. Your earphones are still on, but you're not listening to that musician anymore. See, this is what happens, is we get diverted. And that is why one has to clear the slate and say, I am listening to the music. I don't have a name for that song. I don't have a person for that song. I am just engrossed in that pure music. And that is where you start to move from Savitarka Samadhi to Nirvitarka Samadhi. You by reformatting your memory drive. Children, see, children, somebody says hello, they say hello to them. And we adults are like, why did you say hello to that person? Don't you know I don't like them? Yeah, the child doesn't care because the child's clear. We have all the junk files working on us. And so we are prejudiced. So removing our prejudices is one of the fundamental aspects in listening. So I think we'll go to the last question for today, Sangeeta.
Okay, that sounds good. There are a few more.
What you can do is, next time we meet, we will discuss those questions and see where we can put in a few answers. And if some of them tie together, I'll maybe bring it into one of my Saturdays.
Yes, that sounds good. There are two that are connected, and then one more. We're gonna take three, but two of them are pretty connected. And then one more is about a technical question. So the first one is how to maintain the softness, quietness, silence, and the sanity of one's own self in the unrest. It's very challenging and struggling when self itself knows that it is losing its softness of speech and peace of mind in many situations of life. The breath gets affected and the whole nervous system draws back to square one of mundane reality. And the following one, which is not the same, of course, but it's related, I think. Mother-wife's role on sadhana. Kindly advice on how to intensify my spiritual practice while being a grihasta, and not waiting for the kids to grow up and then starting our journey of going back home. So these two create one question, I feel, and then there's going to be just one last one, sir, please, and thank you.
Well, the only answer I have to both of these questions is you have to live your dharma. That is the only answer to here. Our dharma is what we have to live. So if we are in a position where we have certain roles to be fulfilled as part of where we are, we must do the best to fulfill our dharma. There's just no other way here. Because it's very easy to say that, oh, I'm caught up being a mother, a wife, and when, the kids are older and when my husband is retired, then I'm going to do my sadhana. That will not happen, because when that happens, there'll be new challenges. So what you need to do is realize that you are where you need to be right now. You have been put in the position to fulfill your dharma, and by fulfilling your dharma, burn out your karma. So better to do what you are here for right now. And in the process, let your life become your sadhana. Your sadhana doesn't have to be separate from life. Your sadhana is your life. And that is the only way we can go forward. Because again, this idea that to be spiritual, you have to be very, calm and composed and even toned always. Well, by that yardstick, I am not spiritual at all. Because I get upset, I do shout, I do scream, I do cry, I get upset, I become emotional. But all of that is part of the experience called life. The experience called life is something that you have to live. And not in somebody else's rules. Oh, spiritual people have to be soft-spoken. Says who? And they shouldn't get angry. Says who? This whole idea of the stiff upper lip. I'm sorry, but to hell with it. You have to be yourself as appropriate in that situation. Sometimes you need to be angry. Sometimes you need to be sad. Sometimes you need to be happy. Let all of those experiences nourish you as an individual by learning from the experience. So don't let it be an emotional volatility, but let it be an emotional learning experience. When you lose your temper, try to understand what is it in me that made me lose my temper. Last week, I got mad at someone, slammed the door, and ended up hitting myself in the forehead because the door came back. It was an iron grill door, went out and it came back and hit me here. I'm lucky I didn't get stitches. I just have a small abrasion that has become better now. And it was a good example. Immediately, I'm like, see, I threw the door out in my anger. And what happened? I hit myself, nobody else. So I learned that my anger is only harming me. So next time when I want to slam a door, I better be careful that I don't slam it so hard that it bounces back and hits me. Slam it enough to give the message to people, but don't harm yourself and don't harm the door. See, you are learning every moment. Why do I share this? Every moment we are learning. When I'm sad, I should learn something out of it. When I'm happy, I should learn something out of it. If I am learning something, I am growing. So when you are a wife, when you are a husband, when you are a child, when you are a teacher, wherever you are, can every moment of your life be an experience of learning so that you become a better version of yourself? That's all that matters. So don't worry what people think about you. People may like you, they may not like you. That is their business. Whether you like yourself or not is your business. Do you like yourself? Well, I hope you like yourself. Because if, this is the problem. Others liking you, who cares actually? Because they may or may not like you based on their perspective. Who you are is what you are. And constantly refine it. Refine who you are. Chip away on those parts of you that you can see need to be chipped away. Learn from the experiences. Every experience is part of your evolutionary growth. And once you do that, well, you will be fortunate to live your dharma. Yes, Sangeeta.
Thank you. As a reminder, most of these topics have already been shared by Dr. Ananda in his Scintillator Saturdays. So the way you can go about this is that when you enter Dr. Ananda's YouTube channel, there's a space where you can do a search. It looks like a lens. I can't remember how to say that in English now, but on the screen itself of his page, you can enter a search. So let's say you're searching Bindu, or you're searching Viveka, or you're searching Karma. Then YouTube will bring up the videos that Dr. Ananda has already created on the topic. So if for some reason your questions were fully answered today, or you feel like you need more research, please visit that page because it has so much information. And between the recording of this video that will be sent today and those, you'll probably find much more information that may satisfy your questioning and inquiries. Okay, so this last one is coming with an image that you shared, sir, from Sharma, Dr. Sharma, the role of Kriya Yoga in Patanjali Yoga Sutra in Yoga Mimamsa, where Karma Yoga is related to tapas and the psychomotor domain, Jnana Yoga to Swadhyaya, cognitive domain, and Bhakti Yoga to Ishvara Pranidhana. So the student is asking, I wonder if there is any kind of relationship between tapas and abhyasa, Ishvara Pranidhana, and Vairagya and Viveka. Or Vireka, I think perhaps it's Viveka, I'm not
sure. I would say yes. Tapas and abhyasa, definitely they go together. And I'm just trying to understand here because they have not brought all the three into the question. Tapas, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana should be there. So I don't know where Swadhyaya has gone. I'm a little confused because that question doesn't seem to be complete there. But I think what they mean is that Tapas and abhyasa, definitely they go together. I would say viveka goes with swadhyaya and vairagya with Ishvara Pranidhana. If I have to give a correlation, I can see a correlation happening that way. Abhyasa with tapas, viveka with swadhyaya, and vairagya with Ishvara Pranidhana. So tapas, swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, abhyasa, viveka, and vairagya. I think that's what the person has asked, and I would say we could take it that way. So tapas, abhyasa, swadhyaya, viveka, discernment, and how discernment and introspection, they can go together. And vairagya, non-attachment, letting go, Ishvara Pranidhana, they can go together. So yes, that does correlate to me quite well.
Wonderful. Okay.
I actually, one of the students had actually brought together that same tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhana and correlated with some of the practices we have done. And I think that was a good one, which I don't know if you have shared it or not. So I think it was a very beautiful answer that I saw someplace. I don't know where I saw it. So
yes, it is. It's not a question, but it is something that was reflected in an assignment.
It was actually good because
it was wonderful.
they had created the way these practices could be tied into the Kriya Yoga.
Yes. Tapas is Shabda Pratyahara. Swadhyaya is the Soham mantra. And Ishvara Pranidhana was the Brahmari. It was beautifully
It was a
good.
nice way to look at those practices, actually.
Yeah, those are wonderful. Yeah, that's because we chose them, of course, based on the teachings of the Parampara, but then to see them connected in that way was quite a revelation for me. It's wonderful. Yeah. Okay, so all of these questions, there are more assignments coming in, so there will be more questions that are asked. I have copied all of these questions in the Satsanga sharing document that you all should have access to on Google. If you don't know what I'm talking about, email me and I'll send you the link. You just need to enter, clicking on the link. It will ask you if you want to be an editor, and the answer is yes. So you will ask me permission to be an editor so you can add more questions or comments in the document. If you have any questions on how to go about that, email me. It's quite easy to instruct you. So this will be here. Before module 2, I will save this document as a PDF and send it to everyone, so that if God forbid something happens to the document and one of us gets in there and erases the whole thing, at least we have a PDF copy for us. So yeah, so that's great. I will be sending this recording later tonight by email. So thank you so much, Dr. Sir, for taking the time to answer all of our questions. I'm sure there will be more.
It's always a pleasure. And as I started off, I'm sure Swamiji is very happy about this, because these are the type of questions he would have enjoyed answering. And I always remember Swamiji's satsanga, where he would sit down and after a brief introductory comment would say any questions, and then would start the 3-4 hour satsanga based on whatever question came up. And after a certain point, the students were like holding each other back. Don't ask any more questions, otherwise we don't go to bed tonight. Because he'll just keep on going on with his beautiful answers, many of which have come into that beautiful book called Frankly Speaking. One of Swamiji's books, Frankly Speaking, has a lot of these questions with his answers, which then were printed in Yoga Life over the years. And he just enjoyed it. He really enjoyed answering. And these are the type of questions that I think need to come up, because most of the time you find questions are so weird that you're like, seriously, why do they even bother? And here, these are questions that come from people who are true seekers. And so answering these questions gives me great pleasure, because it's fodder for my own consciousness. So I love it when I get fodder to feed my consciousness and help it grow into something bigger. So thank you all for your inputs into my growth also. Love you all so much. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Janaha Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shantihi 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 Om. Ciao, see you all later. Bye.